Well, thanks for joining us today on the Big Blue Podcast. I'm Greg Stone, Metro Campus Provost, here with Dr. Leigh Goodson, our President and CEO. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing really well because, in part, we are here at the McKeon Center for Creativity at Metro Campus with Dave Poth, Dean of the School of Business and IT, who is always one of the funnest people to talk to. So, Dave, thanks for
thank you.
coming over and spending some time with us to talk about the School of BIT. It's been a big couple of years. You really weren't here as an associate dean too long.
Correct.
Before the reorg.
That's correct.
And you found yourself dean of business and IT. So talk to us about some of the major milestones in this last year or two within the school as things have been coming together, and what have some of those big successes been?
Be glad to. First off, I think one of the biggest successes has been the reorg itself. Just to get the structure of the chairs in their roles with direct reporting lines has been a dramatic improvement, a fabulous improvement, and they have really stepped up. Travis White and Susan Hoggard and Molly McFadden May have really stepped up into that role, and I give them credit because those were undefined roles. They weren't. We had a general idea of where we were headed, but they sort of shaped that job and they made it work, and they've done absolutely that. And one of the successes they've delivered is the goal of fill rate. Our goal had been 80%, and right out of the chute, they hit about 80, 81 for that first year. And then this past year, just thrilled to report that we got 85.
That's fantastic.
And that is
fantastic.
And we should talk, fill rate is the percentage of seats filled in a section.
You got it.
Yeah.
And the importance of that was the efficiency that it delivered. So instead of having 60 students taught in 5 or 6 sections, now we're getting 60 students taught in 3 or 4 sections, and that's just more efficient.
Mm-hmm. And a better experience for the student.
We think so too. I have heard that some of our, especially at the adjunct level, they say, well, I just sure enjoy having more students in my classes now. Mm-hmm. That was an unforeseen byproduct, but a very beneficial one, and one, it's been fun to hear that. Everybody likes a bigger crowd. Everybody likes a bigger crowd. They really do. Travis and Molly have been very active in redesigning some of the degrees in terms of the curriculum, getting it more aligned with the pathways objectives. So Travis delivered on our marketing, our management, and our human resources degree at the AAS level and reconfigured those. And then Molly and her team worked on 2 of our accounting degrees to make them more relevant and also more focused, and I could also argue more efficient. Now, the big news about Travis's work is that those changes in that business degree impacted a couple of hundred students. And so with the BIT advising team, which was another fabulous move of having folks dedicated specific to those school issues, they reached out and contacted over 200 students and said, hey, we want you to know what's going on. Here's what's changed. Here's how it could affect you if you wish. You're also grandfathered in under your old degree plan. Why don't you come by and visit with us, and we'll sit down and talk through it. And I just thought that's getting us where we wanted to be. You know, with the advising goals you had and Dr. Goodson had, it's that personal touch that you can't replace that personal touch. So kudos to them for that. In early February, we pulled off a successful Business and IT week. The focus was on business and IT. We had a major event at Southeast and at Metro that included a meet and greet with professors, with the business and IT advisors I just mentioned. Our 4-year partners were represented, and then we had a guest speaker and lunch activity as well. Had the VP of Human Resources come in from Arvest and give a nice talk on. The theme was what's next? What's next for my courses? What's next for my degree? What's next for my 4-year? What's next when it comes time to get a job, and how does all that work? So that was a big deal, and that was a lot of fun. Another success comes within the corrections program, and we're now working very closely with Langston to give the corrections students a 2-year path and then immediately morph into a 4-year path. It's been a lot of work. It's been painful, to be honest, but it's been worth it, and Jeff Horvath gets all sorts of kudos for guiding us through that process. So we've had some good successes, including PBL.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about PBL in a minute too. That's some amazing work.
Good. Oh, that's a big deal.
By you and your team.
That's a big deal.
Talk to us about some of the most important lessons you've learned since the reorganization and being named dean, which is a different role. We didn't really have that exact role before, but you're the dean of the School of Business and Information Technology. What surprised you about the role?
They were pleasant surprises, honestly. There was a lot of consternation going in. How would this work? What would happen? Could we get past the campus perspective? And I'm real pleased to share that the business folks just sort of picked up and ran with it. So many of them, I think, were used to, quote, reorgs in the industry side of things. They knew why it had to happen. They were aware. There were growing pains. But I was real pleased with just how quickly they seemed to get on board and get their arms around not only what we were trying to do, but why we were trying to do it. And the proof in that pudding was just going to take some time to be able to show them that this was the right thing for the right reasons, and it did have benefit to them. And so we've talked about larger class sizes. There's not the mad scramble. I've noticed it's almost palpable, that concern about making my load, whether that was regular load, full load, max load, whatever load, there always seemed to be that cloud hanging over their heads. Am I going to make it? Am I going to make it? And now with section management and these fill rates, it doesn't seem to be a concern anymore. They just don't worry about it and talk about it nearly as much, and that's a big win. The other thing I've noticed, the importance of a chain of command was evident when it didn't exist, and now it exists, and it's a better thing. Decision making was clumsy at best, and that's being kind. When a topic came across for the 4 associate deans, well, who's going to do this? Who's going to take the lead? It was clumsy, and so now most things will start with me and then either get delegated to the chairs or vice versa, and we know who has to get what done, who has to report to whom, and it's been a real benefit of the reorg. The other thing that's been very important to me has been the communication part. It's real easy now for me to communicate with all of our full-timers quickly and not be overstepping any bounds. So when there's news to share, when there's information, when there's a change coming, they're hearing it pretty much as soon as I can let them know. And I think that's been an invaluable part of this reorg, is the communication piece.
Well, you talked about PBL, Phi Beta Lambda, a little earlier, and I want to kind of come back to that because, of course, as has been the case for a number of years now, our PBL students come back from state competition and national competition just blowing away anybody, including a lot of four-year schools.
Correct.
Including a lot of big-name four-year schools. So
Correct.
Tell us a little bit about PBL as an organization and about what opportunities it provides for students.
Well, it's got a remarkable history at TCC and also reputation across the state and even nationally, to the point you made, Greg, about just how well TCC students compete and how they perform. And that those kudos go to Mitch Ober, who really, I think, got it going and got it rolling and spent a whole lot of years doing it. Passed the reins to Andrew Ford for a couple of years. Andrew got distracted by working on his doctorate, and Lindsay Barbour stepped in, and she has worked tirelessly and provided fabulous leadership to keep that momentum going and that reputation going. At the most recent competition, we finished up, I think I've got somewhere in my mind, 6 or 7 first place winners, and a whole number, I think another 6 or 7 second place winners. And the 10 students are going to head to Baltimore now to participate in the Nationals at the end of June, and that's always a big deal for them. Yeah. For many of them, it's first time out of the city, on airplanes, in hotels, shaking hands, networking, doing the things that business people do, and it's really a fabulous experience. You can tell they come back better because of it, and it also becomes a fabulous resume gem. It's a point of focus. It's a point of, I showed leadership, I showed involvement, Here's how I grew. I competed and lost, and I learned from that. I competed and won, and it just makes me hungrier for more. So all sorts of benefits that come from PBL. And so, again, kudos to the faculty who keep that rolling.
Well, I'm Leigh Goodson, here with my co-host, Dr. Greg Stone, and you're listening to the Big Blue Podcast. Our guest today is Dave Poth, Dean of the School of Business and IT. We've been asking him about TCC's School of BIT. So, Dave, like many of our BIT faculty, you came to Tulsa Community College and higher ed from a career in the corporate world. What are some of the experiences and lessons that you brought from that part of your career to your role as dean?
Good question. We talk a lot about, in most of our classes, many of our introductory business classes are principles of. And there are some principles that, once learned, are never forgotten and are always used. And so I would argue that one, you've heard me mention it earlier, was communication. Not going to give away my age, but I've been around for a while. And lack of communication creates a whole set of problems that almost get unmanageable. It's been my experience that lack of communication, rumors will fill that void. Folks will start to make up their own interpretation, their own stories, their own sense of what's happening. And so I've tried to make it, I've tried to share as much as I can, as soon as I can, both good and bad, just so that they're aware. Because the worst thing, I just don't like to hear when someone says, you knew and didn't tell me, or why doesn't somebody tell me, and why doesn't somebody keep me involved? So I've tried to keep those communication lines open. The business is known for very rational business decisions, looking at some data, looking at some information, and trying to make a decision based on its impact on the end goal, which in this case is student success here at TCC. In business, it could be a marketing of a product or a service. And so those rational decisions, the goal is to try to deliver effectiveness. Are we good or better at what we're doing by virtue of this decision? And are we more efficient? And trying to bring those two to the party. Again, I'm working amongst kindred spirits where they get it, they understand it. It's not a foreign concept. So in that sense, I've been real lucky. And then last but not least, we all can make work and life complicated. And I've tried throughout my career to try to simplify the process as much as I can. I must admit, TCC is a very complicated organization. It is. There's a lot of moving parts. And whatever I can do to try to streamline that and make that a little bit smoother. And if that's only within our business group, then I'm fine with that. We've accomplished some things. But so I'd say communication, decision-making, and simplifying processes are what I brought along with me.
And I think a lot of your colleagues, too, sort of appreciate that perspective that you have about trying to simplify things. I'll just speak for myself, but several times we'll be sitting in ADAPT meetings, which is yet another acronym we've come up with for academic deans and provost's team, and we meet every other week. And I always appreciate how you try to sort of cut through and just get to the point. What are we trying to do? What's the decision we made? And sometimes that perspective, I think, is really helpful.
Well, I appreciate hearing that.
People who have spent a lot of time in higher ed. So, yeah.
Yeah, and again, that truly is, Greg, it's a lesson learned for business because
Right.
you do have to be as efficient as you possibly can to get the result for the customer or for the organization efficiently and effectively. So, well, that's nice to hear. Thank you.
Well, just really quickly, where do you want the School of BIT to go? What's on the horizon for a few years down the road?
Well, I'm really intrigued by Dr. Goodson's desire to continue to make advising part of our culture, to make it accessible. And I would love to see an active faculty role in that and some vision where, let's say we've got 200 accounting graduates, our degreed students in our program at one time. It'd be wonderful if all 200 of them actually had a sit down at some point with an accounting faculty member. And we've got 7. So is it possible that they could meet with 30 students at least one time over the course of a year. We know a lot of that's going on now in a very unstructured way, but there's probably a means of maybe making that a little bit more organized and structured. So that would certainly be one. I'm excited as can be about the trend toward common textbooks. To be honest with you, when I got here, I assumed that's kind of how the world worked. Wow, was I wrong. And I never quite understood it. It created its own sense of inefficiency and so forth and so on. It's taken a little bit of time, but our faculty is getting on board, and they're seeing the benefits of it. And one of the benefits of it is now with section management, when they have to teach at another campus, oh, I can't take my book with me anymore. Uh-oh. Maybe we all ought to get together on the same common textbook. So we're making strides there, and I'm a big fan of the Inclusive Access Program. I think it's met the middle ground between what was perceived as just, well, how could this be this outrageous and out of control in terms of textbook cost, and then other faculty members going to the other extreme saying, I'll create some of my own documents and so you won't need a book. That's not good either. And so this seems to be a good middle ground between an established and quality textbook at a much more reasonable price that a student can afford and available the day we get rocking and rolling. And so those three things I would like to see us keep after.
Well, we're really glad that you joined us today. The last question, Dave, that we ask each of our guests is, what would you do if you had the opportunity? What would you say if you had the opportunity to go back in time and give advice to your 18-year-old self?
That's a good question. I'm not sure my 18-year-old self would have listened.
I think that's the point of the question.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah. I think it would be master time management. That's a skill. It's a commitment. And the reason it's so important is that over the course of a semester, students have lots of expectations, lots of things that are going to take up their week, their month, and their semester. And to be able to sit down and plan out where those fall, and then more importantly, get a jump on them. And I think about it in terms of, a surfer tries to ride the wave or stay in front of it, because the consequences of not doing so is you get swamped and you drowned. And that time management just changes the world. But it's hard to do because you don't think that way. For most of us, we're not trained that way. And, it might even be, I don't know enough about our first year experience content. I would hope time management is a part of that. Yeah. Okay, it's a skill that I think will save students a lot of pain and consternation, and then serve them. Talk about a principle for the rest of their life. Having kids is a time management exercise, and a job and work it's all time management, really, if you think about it. So, looking back on it, I'd probably try to stress that for a young student.
You've been listening to the Big Blue Podcast. We want to thank our guest, Dave Poth, for spending some time with us today, and thank you for listening. Remember, you can catch the Big Blue Podcast each week in the week at TCC and on the Creativity Channel at YouTube. Dave, thanks for being here today. Dr. Goodson, thank you.
Always good to see everybody.
My pleasure.
And we'll see you next
Thank you.
time.